All right. We're coming up on the Christmas season, right? We're coming up on the Christmas season, and there's something that is sure to come up whenever you talk about the Christmas season, and that is gift giving, right? There's always the conversation about gift giving. And out of curiosity, has anybody here ever given a gift? All right. How about have you ever received a gift? All right. Most of us have received gifts, right? Has anybody ever gotten a really good gift? All right. Some of you haven't got those really good gifts yet. I feel bad for you. How about this? Have you ever gotten a really bad gift? Like, my father-in-law is legendary for this, is that he'll have the gift in front of him, he'll open it up, and then with a puzzled look on his face, he'll say something to the effect of, I didn't know I needed that. Which, that's actually become the gift that I want to receive, is his reaction to some gift that was given. Um, but I wanted to get to bad gifts to start off today. I wanted to get to bad gifts. Does any of you that have received a bad gift, is anybody willing to share what that bad gift was? Nobody's willing to share what the bad gift was. Oh, I thought I'd have a more adventuresome. Uh, you got one, Kathy? Okay. Okay.
In decides that I need a little rotten panties.
Oh dear.
No.
No, that wasn't it. Well, how about if you've watched A Christmas Story, Ralphie and what is it, the pink bunny suit that he gets there at the end of it? Um, I want you to know that one of my favorite bad gifts is going to start to show up soon. And Bob, I thought of you. I thought of you because it comes in the mail, and it's in the form of family update letters. Like your family, often with pictures. Is any like okay? I'm not going to make eye contact. For those of you that have me on any type of pedestal, get ready to take me off that pedestal, right? Because like that's not where it is. But you know what I'm talking about. Every once in a while, somebody thinks, you know what? Like all these people need just to know what we're doing, right? That's what people think that my life is missing something because I don't have a picture of them and their family, right? Or that I don't have a letter bragging about their kids or their pets or whatever. And I'll tell you that I'm not. It doesn't. Truth be told, I often don't read the letters. I will just ask Trace who it's from and then roll my eyes because I really consider these folks to be egomaniacs, right? That's really how I look at it. Um, but it can get so much better or so much worse from there, depending on your point of view. Because some people will say, for Christmas, I was thinking of you, and I really just thought that you needed an individual picture of me. Right? Have you ever had that? Now, grandparents, maybe this is a little bit different, but I want to pause for a moment because I'm sure that somebody here is probably a little uncomfortable with this because you've taken the time to write a family update letter. Maybe they're at the printers. Maybe you had to get everybody together to pose for a picture. I'm sure I'm starting to offend somebody, um, but I want to remind you that we're studying forgiveness. We're studying forgiveness now. And this setup has a point, and I really want you to think about this. If you came in next Sunday and I gave you an envelope, and in that envelope, well, if I gave you the envelope, you may first be intrigued, right? Oh, wow, Jess gave me an envelope. This is really, really nice, right? You may even be excited. I wonder what Jess could put in an envelope for me. But then if you opened it up, if it was just a picture of me, my guess is any anticipation that you have would quickly become disappointment, right? It would quickly, I would suspect that some of you would actually leave the picture behind at your seat. That's what I would suspect. I suspect that it would not make it home, that it would not make it on your refrigerator, right? That's where it was. But what if I gave you a picture and it was in a frame? What if I gave you a picture in a frame? What if next week when you came in here, there was a picture of me for you and that picture was framed? What does a frame do? And I'm going to suggest to you that what a frame does is a frame asks you to focus on what's inside of it. A frame asks you a frame tells you this is what you should look at. Now, my general discipline has been I wanted you to have one-off lessons in this class. And now here we are. I believe this is week 8 that we're studying forgiveness. This was not, and it only may be week 8.5, right? Because this may be, this may have to get stretched. But we've been locked in for forgiveness for 8 weeks, and I'm telling you, we still have a long way to go. I was hopeful to be done at the end of the year. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I don't know that that's going to be the case. Last week, we looked at the steps to forgiving ourselves. And I'm just curious, anybody spend some time in the bathroom looking in the mirror this past week? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, good lesson. Really good lesson. Thanks. Appreciate that. Um, I'll tell you this, it doesn't work if you don't try it. Doesn't work if you don't try it. As we've gone through this study, how many of us have recognized that we have more people that we need to forgive? Right? I think we're finding that, yeah. And I'm going to tell you, we're not going to get to forgiving other people today. Last week, I thought, let's talk about forgiving ourselves because we got to be able to forgive ourselves. We need to start there before we move into forgiving other people. And we're going to get there. We're not going to get there today. We may even not get there for the next couple of weeks. But what I'm going to give you today is a formula or a framework on how we can forgive. Now, if you've been with me long enough, you know that I like formulas, I like phrases, I like frameworks, I like things that just give a little bit of structure to what we have going on. It sort of gives you some handles that you can hold on to carry it. When it comes to being offended, right? We talked about that there is some offense that happens that we encounter, and then the offense requires forgiveness. But I think we would agree that there are different levels to how you have been offended. There's different levels. We're going to categorize these into 3 buckets today. All right? And just as because I'm a sophisticated person, the 3 buckets that I have for you are small, medium, and large. All right? Small, medium, and large offenses. And based on these offenses, we're going to look at how do we move forward in the forgiveness process. The way that we forgive is different for a small offense than what it is for a big offense. And I don't know if you have thought about this before. I know I hadn't, and I need to tell you that the the resources that I've been using for these lessons, please don't think I've come up with this on my own. This is a series that I went through back second half of 2020 from Transformation Church. They did 12 weeks on the subject of forgiveness, which I didn't realize 12 weeks was possible. And this is one of the lessons that they did, which is at the root, but we're going to add some different things to it. But I want to just recognize that church for the work that they've done in this because I think it's been very helpful, and I think you'll find a great deal of value in this today as well. But to move forward with forgiveness, we need to categorize. We need to frame, right? When you get a picture, you have to get the picture and you got to put it in the right size frame. You don't get a wallet picture and put it in a giant frame. And likewise, if you get a giant picture and you try to put it in your wallet, it doesn't work that way, does it? So we need to frame the offenses in the right way. Because if we look at these offenses appropriately, we may find out that we can work through these offenses and forgiveness more purposefully. All right, that's kind of the thesis where we are today. Some people are stuck in a place of unforgiveness, right? Not because they don't want to forgive, but perhaps because they haven't framed the offense the right way. And because they haven't framed it the right way, they're not working through it the right way, and they find themselves in a place where they're stuck. One of my favorite notes that I've ever taken is two words, and it's that stuck stinks. Stuck stinks. You find yourself stuck, that's a good Thanksgiving memory. There was one thing, keep me honest on this. There was one Thanksgiving where it was, hey, everybody go over to Aunt Darlene's house. And my niece decides she needs to drive through the field behind our house. And it's been raining. You know where this is going. They literally get stuck in our backyard. Stuck stinks for them, and also stuck stinks for us as well whenever they tear up our backyard doing that. Stuck stinks. It's not a good place to be. I suspect we have all forgiven certain things in our lives, and perhaps we all have other areas where forgiveness has been much more slow or much more difficult, or perhaps it's even stalled out. And as such, we need some different tools to handle these different offenses, just like we need different frames to frame different size pictures. When it comes down to it, we live in a world which seems to actively invite us to be offended. We live in a world where there's all sorts of people that try to get us riled up about someone, something. Like if you've ever watched the news invites you to get offended about something, to be up in arms about something, right? If you don't watch the news, maybe you've read the newspaper. Newspaper will invite you to get up in arms about things. If you go outside, you will find reasons to get up in arms about things. You'll find reasons to be offended. Sometimes, I'll tell you, you can actually just breathe and you will be able to offend people. Right? It's happened. It's happened. I can remember being offended. This again, whatever pedestal you put me on, do not just destroy the pedestal. I remember being at a team meeting, and a woman on my team had about 35 bangle bracelets on her arm, and every time it just clanged all over the place, and it just offended me. It was just like just slight movements just created all this noise. I was like, oh my goodness, can you be more quiet, right? But I tell you that because it is so easy to acquire an offense. It's so easy to acquire an offense. And what so many people do is they simply try to forget the pain of the offense. And they'll do this through any means necessary. And a lot of times those means are not healthy or not beneficial, right? But today we're going to explore framing the offense so that we can process forgiveness in a positive way. That's the intent that we're looking at today. Because if we can frame it correctly, we can process it correctly. That's really what we are looking at doing. When it comes down to it, your frame determines your focus. And you cannot forgive what you do not focus on. Now, I'm suspicious that many of us today who have struggled to forgive someone for something is likely because we haven't framed the offense correctly. Now, that's a big claim, and I'm going to invite you to actively test that as we go through this today. Again, this is a framework. I think it works. You may find that it doesn't, but I think you'll find a lot of value in it today. I want to I want to understand today a couple of things. One, I think we need to understand how people hurt us. I think we need to understand why forgiveness is still necessary in that, because there's times that people hurt us and they didn't even know it. There's times you've hurt somebody and you didn't know it. So we need to recognize, that forgiveness is a necessary part of this. And ultimately, I want to try to help you find the pathway to work through that forgiveness. But where it's going to start is there is a world of difference between intent and impact. There's a world of difference between intent and impact. If you would, turn with me to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23. We're going to look at verse 34. Jesus is on the cross. He's going through the process of physically dying. The soldiers have nailed him to the cross. They've put him up there. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but if somebody was to nail you to a cross, would there not be the possibility that you could take offense? Would there not be that possibility? And what does Jesus say while he's on the cross? Verse 34 tells us, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." They don't know. There's times that you can offend people and you don't know it. You see, in this example, what Jesus does is he separates an action from an intent from an impact. Right? These are separate things. Their action was that they crucified him. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't understand the full intention of that. And the impact is that he had deep suffering. Right? So in this example, what Jesus does is he acknowledges ignorance, but not innocence. He acknowledges ignorance, not innocence. And when it comes down to it, their lack of awareness in this, it didn't remove the impact of what they did. He still died, right? So forgiveness requires compassion and clarity. We need to have that. We need to have compassion and we need to have clarity. If we're going to go through the healing process of forgiveness, we're going to have to deal with an experience and not necessarily the motives of the other person. And likewise for us. Likewise for us. Many years ago, and I don't even remember what it was. I was invited to Sunlight for something. I don't know if it was career day. I don't know what it was. But I was taken into the preschool room and my nephew Drew was in that class. So Drew was in there. And so they sit me down here in this chair and all the little kids are coming over. And They're getting situated. And all of a sudden, I hear this little girl say, "Ow, Drew kicked me." To which point, Drew's response was, "I didn't kick you that hard," which I think is just brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant, right? He's basically saying, I could have kicked you harder. I could have had more intent with this. I could have had a worse intent. Have you ever found yourself in conflict and one of your responses or the response given to you was, "Well, I didn't mean to. I didn't, with kids, with something breaks, I didn't mean to," right? Like there's this, the intent is a big part of this. Just as an aside, a phrase that has gathered use in my house over the last several years is the phrase, "You ain't got to get hot about it," which I try to use at inappropriate times. So sometimes there'll be a crash of dishes or whatever, at which point my response are, "You ain't got to get hot about it," right? Where it's most funny is that if you just ask somebody a simple question like, "Hey, are you warm enough? Are you cold enough? Whatever, is temperature good for you?" And they just answer very plainly, yes or no, then your response is, "Well, you ain't got to get hot about it," right? You don't have to take offense. Um, that's probably funnier to me than it is to you. Feel free to use that. Try it out. See if you like it. Just answer. Just say every once in a while, "You ain't got to get hot about it." Um, but what I want you to understand is what people mean and what people do can be two different things. What people mean and what people do can be two different things. You see, people can hurt you accidentally. Has anybody ever accidentally been hurt? I think we all have. We've all accidentally been hurt. Sometimes we've been hurt carelessly. Ever been in a situation like that? There's just a lack of care when there's times when you can be hurt immaturely. There's times where you can be hurt through ignorance. Somebody wasn't aware at all. However, there's also times where people can hurt you intentionally. They can set out to do it. And there's times they can do it sinisterly, right? Like they can come out and be really, really mean and diabolical about it. So I want to give you just some biblical evidence here. This is for Bob because he likes lots of scripture in the lesson. Um, but unintentional sin still requires atonement. We get this in the Old Testament. If you want to turn with me to the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verses 27, 28, and 29. Scripture reads, "But if just one person sins unintentionally, that person must bring a year-old female goat for a sin offering. The priest is to make atonement before the Lord for the one who erred by sinning unintentionally. And when atonement has been made, that person will be forgiven." One and the same law applies to everyone who sins unintentionally, whether a native born Israelite or a foreigner residing among you. When unintentional offenses happen, forgiveness is still required. Still required. Now, there's other times where you can have really an evil intent. Story of Joseph gives us an example of this, right? Story of Joseph, his brothers don't like him, and they say, "You know what? We're gonna beat him up and we're gonna sell him into slavery and never have to deal with him again." God had a different plan, and they're reunited at the end of the book of Genesis. If you want to turn with me, I'm sure you know this verse, but if you join me in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Joseph is been reunited with his brothers, and he says to him, he said, "You intended to harm me. You had an intentional offense against me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the savings of many lives." Like, and then there were some people who were downright miserable about it. There was this zealot after the death of Jesus. His name was Saul. He was persecuting. He was like being as ornery and miserable as he could be to the early church. Paul writes to Timothy, 1 Timothy 1:13. He said, even though I was once a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent man, I was shown mercy because I acted in ignorance and unbelief. There's different levels to how we offend people. There is. So what I want you to understand about this is that there is an intent that the other person can have. And that intent should inform our compassion. We should have compassion on people because we need to have compassion, especially on people who are hurting us and they don't even know it. But the impact that that offense has on you is going to shape your healing path, the way that we go through this. So I have a worksheet for you today. We're going to pass this out. I don't know the fastest way to get through it. But if this worksheet, if you find value in it, this may be one of the best things that you can come across here. What this does is this worksheet begins to frame the different types of offenses: the small, the medium, and the large. Okay? And there's different steps that we need to go through these offenses, right? So we have, and you'll see that there's some letter play. And again, this is ruthlessly stolen from Transformation Church. But you know, we're going to find that the letters are going to repeat like what real pastors do. They find ways to make that stuff work. But we're going to look through where does the offense happen? For these small things, where does that happen? For the medium ones, for the big, like where does the offense happen? And then how does that make you feel? And I'm going to tell you right now, I think this part of it, the feeling part of it, may be so informing to us that you realize that there was something that happened and there's a way that it makes you feel. But when you see the rest of the grid, you're going to say, you know what, I'm on the wrong pathway because of the way I feel. So let's go ahead. Do we have enough? Okay. Um, I want to invite you to look at Colossians 3:13. Paul gives the instruction, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. What I want you to know is that there's not an exception. The instruction is to forgive anyone. Whether it's a small offense, a little bigger, or some of the biggest, right? So I've debated on the right way to go through this. I don't know the right way to go through this. Judging by the time, we're not going to get very far through it. So what I'm going to do today is I think we're going to just work down this column. We're going to work down this column today. I'm going to invite you back in 2 weeks. I'm going to invite you back in 2 weeks. And then what we may do is we just may move step by step across. We'll see how this goes. But the first and the smallest type of offense that we can have is what we're going to call the frustration offense, right? These are small offenses. These are irritations. These are annoyances. For those of you that have been in this church a very long time, I remember I remember a sermon that our associate pastor Rod Sylvie gave all those years ago. I look at Bill, I look at Gary, Tim, and Linda. I remember Pastor Rod. I don't know if anybody else would have been here back in those days. But I remember him giving an example of like, what if, you're driving down the road and somebody's coming at you, they recognize you, you don't recognize them, they wave to you, you ignore them. Have you ever waved to somebody? Well, there's two things. Have you ever waved to somebody and you realized it wasn't who you thought it was? And then you try to ask cool about it? Like, have you done that? Like, yeah, I've done that. Like when Josh and Corinne started living on the hill, now I see this red truck going up and down the hill. So anytime a red truck comes, it's like, and sometimes there's red trucks that Josh ain't in. Like, oh, well, they know where the cool people live now, right? So I was also walking out on the road a lot of that time as well. But there's times when you may go down the road, you may see somebody, you may wave at them, but they're deep in thought. They're on a call. They're dealing with life. The sun's in their eyes. There's any number of things, and they don't respond to you. And so you could be offended. What type of like I knew Josh was a little bit different, but like he doesn't return a wave to anybody on the hill. Like what? Like I don't know if that's actually true, Josh. I'm just picking on you. Please don't let this become an offense. Oh, you are? Yeah. Well, it's that like that's where it is. So what I want you to understand about these offenses is they happen at a place that we're going to call the exchange. They happen at a place that there's a place where we intersect for a moment, and somehow something goes sideways. Right? There's something. These are quick moments. These are misunderstandings. These are inconsiderate behaviors. Bob, I'm going to give you a verse here, and I'm going to put it on the board. Proverbs 12:16. Proverbs 12:16. Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. What happens is that when one of these events occurs, there's a passing, there's whatever, there's this exchange, there's this frustration that I said something that wasn't responded to, it was responded to in a different way, whatever it was. What happens in this? You have this feeling, and the feeling that you get is you get the feeling that you are not valued. You get this feeling that you're not valued. 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 13, I forgot it already. 13, 4, and 5. Paul writes, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Now, I hazard a guess that we've all experienced these small frustration type offenses. Sometimes you send a text message and the text message is not responded instantly. It leads to these frustrations. Now sometimes, and so this happens, and you feel like I wasn't valued. But then what happens is sometimes you can you will respond to somebody or you'll start treating somebody in a certain way. And the way that you'll treat people is that you will become very petty. I know I told you I'm going to tell a meatloaf story. This is not a meatloaf joke. So the intent is not to laugh at this. But I had made a lot of meatloaf jokes over the years. And I am allowed to give comment because I have consumed said meatloaf. But when somebody else makes a comment about Trace's meatloaf, I was offended. And I know the person that made comment had, there was no ill intent at all. No ill intent. They thought they were funnier than what they were. They weren't that funny. But it's like, because of that, and this is an issue I got to work through, right? This is an issue I got to work through. Um, but because of that, it's it's I become petty. And I recognize that. Like, everything they do, well, I can find fault in it. I'm getting a lot of blank stares here as if I'm the only one that's ever done this. This resonate with anybody? Anybody? How about this? Maybe not with you. You're all a little more mature, a little more sophisticated than I am. Maybe you know somebody who would do something like this. Like, this is the plot of every sitcom, is it not? Like, you know, that's what there's something like I should have a George Costanza example here. I'm sure there's a George Costanza example of this, right? Like, there's something that happens, there's the offense, and so you become very, very petty about it. Proverbs 19:11. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." Sometimes I insist on being unwise and impatient. And I suspect many of us have as well. Some of us have had an encounter with somebody at some point where it's like, I'm never going to, I'll go out of my way to avoid that person. I am that petty. Somebody brings them up, you have all sorts of reasons that you can bring them down. Got all sorts of comments, right? The antidote, the antidote for frustration is maturity. We need to become a little more mature. Now, here's the thing about maturity. It's not automatic. Just because you have grown up does not mean you have grown up. That's the way that it works. 1 Corinthians 13:11. 1 Corinthians 13:11. Paul writes, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." I want you to know this today. Maturity is a choice. You have a choice in this matter. And so, what do we do? The answer to this is that we need patience. We need patience, right? Galatians 5:22 and 23. Paul writes, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. Against such things there is no law. We need we need to practice patience for these small offenses. I was working at the pharmacy on East 26th Street in Erie. At the time, I wore a badge of honor that if I worked more hours, that meant I was a better pharmacist than you. That is not true. Um, but I at least thought that way about myself. And so I was logging a lot of hours. I was logging a lot of hours. And as such, I was tired and I was impatient. And I had a father and a kid come in one day, and the father's dropping off the prescription, and the kid looks at me, points at me, and says, "Hey, you're funny looking," which I did not need at that time. And I will tell you right now that my maturity level was not very high. I will tell you that my patience level was not very high. And what I wanted to do was to tell that kid that they were ugly and dumb. And I had a whole list of things. Like I mean, I could have made a list because I was being petty. I was. I recognize that now. Now I didn't. That was probably I don't know where that came from at that moment, but I was like, oh my goodness. And I thought, what type of parent takes their kid in public where the kid just randomly insults other people? Like, I mean, I was going through all of that. So what's our reaction to this? The reaction I'm going to suggest is that we got to bounce back. We got to rebound, bounce back. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that when we fill this chart out, you're going to see that E is going to go across V, like these things are going to go. So some of these may not be the best words, but they'll have the same letters, which just to give you that. Um, Romans 12:21. Paul writes, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Right? He's basically saying, practice the law of forgiveness. Right? And we talked about that in one of the early weeks of our study here. Let me, I'm going to fill in a couple of these for you just as a teaser. If you have found value in this, we'll go through this section again quickly whenever we come back for this in 2 weeks. Um, but what I want to get you to think about is this. And I do have my chart here. I have my own chart. It's all filled in. Um, but like there are some times when we have medium offenses, we can feel like a victim. Anybody here ever felt like a victim? Yeah. Yeah. And there's times when we can feel like we were violated. Anybody ever had that feeling? Right? And I'm going to tell you that this framework, you're going to have different responses. And I think, and this is what captured my imagination. This is what sort of has me excited about this. And I wonder if it will make you excited about it. That sometimes if we have this feeling and we're trying to just get over it, it ain't working. We have a picture that's in the wrong size frame. Some of these things that happen are so significant that they change the way we think about ourselves. So I tell you that as an invitation, not just to come back, but if you think that if you've had value with this so far, I want to encourage you to invite somebody with you. Because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people who struggle with forgiveness. And if you're going about it the wrong way, that's probably making the whole situation worse. With that, I've gone way over time. There's no way we're going to get through any more of this today. I'm going to wrap it up there.